All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy everybody's here today. It's Monday morning. I'm Laura Barr, the founder of Emerging Educational Consulting. I am the owner and founder, and the job of Emerging is to empower students from the beginning to end of the college application process. I wake up every day to grow good humans. And what better way to do that than to empower and transform with education? Which is why today we have Brandon Slade from Untapped Learning. I am beside myself, as always, to talk to you, Brandon, because you are the guru of executive function. And we've been talking lately, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself, but we've been talking about how the heck we have never really connected until this past year, when for so long we've been doing the same work in the world, which is to scaffold learning and academic success in ways that empower students for lifelong success. So I want you to do your own bio, and then we're going to dive into questions that we have from our audience.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the kind words. Guru's strong for a scattered person who's trying to pull it together. But thank you, and I adore your work and I adore your practice. So thank you again for having me. Just my super quick background is I grew up. I have hyperactive ADHD. I was diagnosed at a young age, and I was kind of a hot mess from day one. I was that kid who was all over the place in the classroom. There's like a team of people trying to figure out what do we do with this child in the general education setting, right? And so I have two brothers built like myself. And so we just grew up in a way where we had tons of energy and livelihood, and we struggled with these skills. And so where my passion comes from is I actually left, I'm from Boulder County. I left Boulder County and went out to Ohio on a football scholarship, and I just bombed. I couldn't manage the academic with the athletic with the social. And I finally had to admit that I needed support with these skills. And that's where the passion comes from. And I know you do such a great job preparing them for the launch, and then we see a lot of them after the launch. So I think that's the great connection.
I love that. Let's just talk about executive function for a second. What is it? Why does
Yeah.
it matter? And why is everyone talking about it today?
It's weird to me that everyone's talking about it today, since it's been the foundation for learning for forever, right? And so it's weird that it's getting so much publicity now. But executive function is the complex set of skills that all work together so you can achieve your goals. So your goal may be something big, like you want to get into a certain university or be star of the musical or make the varsity soccer team. It's your executive function skills that help you reverse engineer that goal into daily manageable steps and stay on track to reaching that goal. And it also helps you reorient when things go wrong. So what's tied up into our executive function skills are things like time management, getting started on tasks, something we call metacognition, so the ability to understand yourself, working memory, and there's a bunch in there, but it's basically how we reach our goals, whether they're big or small.
You know, a lot of times I liked how you said, I believe you are the guru, and people know you are the guru of executive function. So let's just call that out. And it's interesting that you said there's like a correlation, but like, is smart executive function, is intelligence, like, are they the same? Can you be smart and scattered? Can you be smart without executive function? Like, what is it? What's the difference between being smart and intelligence and all of those factors?
That's such a great question, because there's no correlation between your executive function development and your intelligence. We see this over and over, and often our most bright students are the most scattered and need support with these skills. This can be frustrating, because you see these flashes of intelligence, and then they're the students who go to school with one shoe on, right? We call them the kids who are going to cure cancer but can't find their car keys. So there's no correlation between intelligence and executive function. And keep in mind, your executive function skills are just skills like any other skills. We can work on them. We develop them. They're hard work, but we can do this, right? And one of the core misconceptions we see is not only the executive function is not your intelligence, but executive function is not your character. Just because we're running late to something doesn't make us rude. Just because we forget to turn something in doesn't make us lazy. It means we have a lot of hard work to do on these skills, but it's not our character.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that lazy motivation, because I think anyone who's been in this field for years and years hears that a lot. My student's not motivated. My student's not my student is lazy. They just won't do the work, kind of thing. So how does that fit in with what we're talking about today?
Yeah, depending on the situation, right? When I hear motivation, like when we hear parents talk about motivation, they're like, "I just want my student to be motivated." Well, I'm not that concerned about motivation because motivation comes and goes, right? If it's a cold day, if it's windy, our motivation's just drained. I'm worried about systems. Does the student have a productivity system? Are they going to office hours and wrapping themselves up with structure? Because even if you're not motivated, but you have that structure around you and have systems, you're going to be fine, right? And so focusing more on systems than motivation. And then the other piece of it as well is that this procrastination word trickles in. I think when I started Untapped about 10 years ago, it felt like it was 25% of my job helping students overcome this procrastination monster. I think it's 100% of my job right now. And anybody in education sees it, right? It's all of us are so entrenched in procrastination. And one of the misconceptions about procrastination is people think of it strictly as a behavior. Well, more and more research is coming out that procrastination is actually highly emotional. We're
Mm.
overwhelmed by what we have to do. And so we don't start because it feels too big. And that's why we go off on our phone or do something else, is because we're just overwhelmed by the task.
I know in our practice, we have a lot of students who have a diagnosis of ADHD. And I also know that executive function is impacting students who don't have diagnoses either. Like, what are you seeing around that that conversation? Like, is it just something people have if they have a diagnosis, or is it something that all people need to be addressing, and why?
In the past few years, we see more and more students without a diagnosis with big time executive function struggles, specifically around time management, procrastination, and just this understanding of ourselves we call metacognition. To take a quick back, the populations that really struggle with these skills typically, we have ADHD. Doesn't matter if it's hyperactive, inattentive, combined, it is a 100% chance that you will struggle with these skills. ADHD was actually poorly named. It's not really an attention deficit. We do pretty well with attention when we're highly interested in it. It's more of an executive function deficit. So there's ADHD. Then we have dyslexia. Those students struggle. The gifted population struggles, students on the spectrum. And then when we're in a highly anxious state, when we're in fight or flight, this higher order thinking part of the brain essentially turns off. And then heaven forbid, if you're in a depressive state while you're working through those mental health challenges, you'll need support with these executive function skills. So those are the core populations that struggle. But to answer your question, we're seeing more and more students just struggle with these skills regardless.
Today I actually was onboarding a new a mentor in our practice today, and I was thinking about how much I needed to scaffold what I was training into these tiny little pieces. And I was also thinking about how we do that in our practice for the application process, right? I always say the beginning to end, and we're reverse engineering from the beginning to end the college application process because there are so many things that have to be done. What do you do in your practice?
Yeah, well, I want to call out something you just said because I think it's so important. Around Untapped, we call it making toast. So there's a metaphor, which is actually a very real story in my life. Every morning, my mom would give us a pep talk growing up, my two scattered brothers and I, and she would say something. Today's the actual day we're going to get to school on time. Like she gives a pep talk and she would say, like, put some butter on some toast and meet me in the car in 5 minutes. She'd come back in the house. We were wrestling and the house was a mess. And then, when you look at that making toast task, there's like 9 steps to get from beginning to end to do it successfully. So if your student's struggling with these skills, one of the best things that you can do is break stuff down into small, manageable steps and give them 2 pats on the back and 1 kick in the tail, allow
Mm.
love and a lot of accountability throughout the process, which is exactly what you guys do, which is why I'm a huge fan. And so if you see your students struggling with either procrastination or just overwhelmed with the process, it's a skill to learn how to break these tasks down into small, manageable pieces, give them love and accountability throughout the process.
What let's get into a little bit more about, so we guide our students and we get them to college, and where do you take our students from there? Like, what is it that Untapped is up to? Tell us that.
Yeah, so basically, so students don't turn out the way I turned out, and a lot of us did, right? It's when students are on campus, we'll meet with them. once to twice per week. And, the first meeting is the planning, prioritizing, which a lot of our students struggle with, going through the Canvas or whatever the school's portal is, all the syllabuses, and figuring out what is the clear to-do list for the week, including things like changing your dorm room sheets or, like going to the gym and taking care of the basics. So we get clear lists. And then at the end of the week, there's a lot of accountability weaved in so we don't fall too far behind. We also do a lot of practice on how to advocate, how to talk to your professor. We do a lot of our instruction through an executive function lens. If a student is struggling with an assignment, often our students have all the content knowledge, but they haven't figured out how to take all that knowledge and get it out, right? It's stuck in their head and they get stuck in procrastination. So it's a lot of touch points and a lot of coaching because our kids just need a lot of feedback at that stage in their life. Going from home and all the structure where your teachers plan everything out for you in school, and then you have maybe practice after school and your parents plan your meals. Going from that to a college campus where you maybe have 3 hours of appointments a day or classes, it's a big jump for a lot of our students and they struggle with that. So we support that process.
It's almost like, I always think about this when I'm explaining college to students, is our high school students have such structured lives. Like that structure is already so in place. You have the wake up in the morning, your parents drive you to school or you drive to school or whatever it is. And then you don't get home until 5, or you have the sports. And college, there's just not as much as that structure. So it has to be recreated without students knowing how it was ever created in the first place, because most of it was just taken for granted because that's what parents do. It's their job, right?
Absolutely. Well, and a lot of people ask, why are more and more students struggling with these skills? There's a lot of reasons, right? Increased time on screens, we're spiking dopamine and so we see struggles. But the other piece of it, which you're speaking to, is our generation, we were growing up, it was the whole come home when the lights come on generation. And there was a lot of planning and a lot of skills we had to develop in order to be that independent. And now that we don't have that piece of parenting or childhood, our kids, this is the first time a lot of them are in charge of getting medication for themselves when they get sick, or cooking for themselves, or figuring out how to do laundry, and they get stuck in it and they just kind of freeze.
What do you recommend to parents? I mean, you and I had this conversation last week, so I love it. It's more like a problem solving, like what can providers like you and I guide families on to set their kids up for success early in the process?
Your recommendations, what we talked about, were perfect. The whole middle school and high school, when students have them help with the cooking or do their own cooking, doing their own laundry, the amount of students who get stuck with the laundry machine and can't figure out how that works, or just don't do their laundry because they're so overwhelmed by it, wearing their shirts inside out, we're like, let's just wear it again, because I can't figure out how to use the laundry machine, right? So doing that stuff at home, cleaning, learning how to clean your room. I know we see a lot of students with ADHD. When I say clean your room, they go blank because they don't even know what that technically means. It has a different definition to everyone. So having them do all that on their own in the structure of your household, they may not like it, but at least they know how to do it. And then the second piece of it is some semblance of an organization system. The biggest red flag for me when I talk to a student is, I'll say like, well, how are you going to remember this appointment? Or how are you going to remember how to do this homework? And they're like, well, I'll just remember it. That's like the biggest red flag to me, that this student is going to struggle mightily, because eventually the task list gets long and their work and memory gets eat up because they're running their list all day, every day in their head. And then anxiety builds. And so if they have some kind of an organizational system, whether it's a planner, a Google Calendar, reminders on your iPhone, again, they may not love it at home, but at least they know how to do it when it becomes relevant. The kids who don't know how to do it are the ones who worry me a lot.
I know last week when we talked, we agreed that practicing those things at home where the stakes are lower is the best. We have we actually created a launch checklist in our practice that we give all of our parents when they first onboard. I think you can get it on our website too, but that launch checklist has things like, has a driver's license, makes their own doctor's appointments, arranges their own haircuts, right? And for some of the families that we work with, they'll say things like, this is just too much. And all I say is just one thing at a time. Just one thing at a time. What's the stats on how long it takes to develop a new habit? Isn't it like 8 weeks? Is it?
They're all over the place. Some say 55 days. Some say if you have ADHD, it's longer.
Mm.
But first of all, check that. I've seen that checklist. That checklist is phenomenal. I highly recommend checking that out. And then the other piece of it too. Have you heard of the book called Tiny Habits?
No, I know all the atomic habits and
Yeah.
habit stacking and all of that, but I haven't heard of Tiny. Tell me about it.
So Atomic Habits gets all love. Tiny Habits is a book out of Stanford Behavioral. And in that book, they give crazy experiments. So they'll have like one group say, you're going to develop a flossing habit. And then they'll have another group say, you're going to floss one tooth. Which group do you think is more likely to have a long-term flossing habit?
Is it one tooth?
It's the one tooth because it's not emotionally overwhelming. And again, we know routines build momentum over time. A lot of people are like, well, I'm not just going to floss one tooth. And they don't trust that the routine will develop. They did the same thing with populations like get in shape versus do one push-up. Same thing, the population that did one push-up over time was willing to build because they saw the benefits and it wasn't this emotionally overwhelming thing. And so what you're speaking to speaks directly to the research of go slow to go fast. When we try to fix everything, we're going to fix nothing. Like, what is that lead domino? What's that one routine we can implement or help our children with now that we know will gain momentum over time?
I love it. I actually have someone from the audience who's asking a question. I'm going to process where I think this question is going. But if we think about students and safety and executive function, have you ever had to address that? The question actually is, how worried should I be for a child's safety? And what can a parent with a child going away do to help keep them safe? And if we think about that from an executive function lens, how would we piece this apart for this parent?
Yeah, great question. It's hard without knowing a lot of details, but I'll do my best. Um, First of all, it's really hard as a parent of a teenager. I think you and I've talked to thousands of parents, and every time, like, what's this child going to be doing in 10 years when they're like 15 or 16? It always goes to this dark place, right? They're always living under a bridge, and it's a mess. When in real life, if you're doing the right things, it doesn't turn out like that, right? Like they'll develop, and they surprise us more often than not. So I try not to go to a dark place. But I think in the question, we're referring to the impulsivity side of this. Impulsivity is an executive function is an executive function skill. And often our kids with ADHD have Ferrari brains with bicycle brakes. Their brain is moving so fast and it's hard to get them to slow down. So what I would recommend if that's the case, is you may want to look at maybe a gap semester or a gap year if you're that concerned, because we're battling brain chemistry here. So not only do you want a great coach, a great mentor, someone who that student looks up to, but we know the ADHD brain matures 3 to 5 years behind the quote unquote typical brain. And so some of this will occur naturally if we keep doing the right things and then go to college, just giving that brain a little bit more time to mature if you're really concerned here.
I actually will add on to that. I'll
Please.
piggyback onto that I am okay with that kind of a recommendation as long as then the practice of whatever skills we're trying to build are in place. Sometimes what happens with too long of a gap program or a gap program that doesn't scaffold is we end up in the same place a year later. And so sometimes for me, it's like, what is the goal that we're trying to tackle here? And if it's safety because we're worried about impulsivity, that's one thing. And then I also think there's just habits of things like really preloading students before they go to school about what safety looks like. Again, breaking down the tiniest pieces into here's what being safe at college looks like. You lock your dorm room at night. You don't walk alone. We don't take alcoholic drinks from anybody unless we have poured them. I mean, ideally you're waiting till you're 21, but let's not kid ourselves. Like, these are things we need to talk to our kids about. Like, no means no in a situation, right? Like, I think there's really breaking it down And again, putting these students in situations where they almost have to role play or things like that. So I think what you said, I think, is really, really important. Like, are they ready? Then the question is, how are we going to get them ready? And the way we're going to get them ready is by implementing systems and structures so that we can slowly prepare them over time. But I think what you said that really, really got me today is, and this is the tiny habits, right? You can't say, just be safe in college, right? Like, be safe in college is like 100 different habits we have to develop over time, right?
Yeah, well, and I love your answer. So yeah, if diving into the question even further, if there is a specific piece that you're unsure about, like I don't think they're going to make good decisions in X situation, breaking that situation apart into micro skills. It goes back to the making toast and what you just said. I and explicitly teaching those, that's the best way to go.
Yeah. I raised 4 kids, neurodiverse kids, and I feel like my advice to families is, this isn't like a Sunday afternoon workshop. Like, this is every morning from the minute you wake up, and they are setting their own alarms, to the minute that they're making decisions, what time and when to go to bed, and how they regulate themselves to be able to sleep. It's weaving these practices into their lives all throughout the day. I think the position you and I are in is often what parents say to us is, my kids aren't listening to me anymore. They need a mentor. And I like to say to families that that's great news to me, because it is the job of a young human adolescent to be individuating. And individuating means they're breaking away from their parents' kind of overall cloud, and they're branching out into the world. What we don't have anymore in our society are those natural mentors, coaches, school counselors. I mean, we have those people out there, but often they're either not trained or they're overbooked. And so both of us are in roles where we are providing substantial and extensive mentorship based on neuroscience and best practice education pedagogy, right? And I think that that matched with parenting that is cycling through all day long, putting the responsibility on to the kids, is where the magic is going to happen for a lot of these students.
Couldn't have said it better. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah, it's hard to realize that it's developmentally appropriate for a lot of our students to rebel before the launch because they're rebelling against people that they know love them, right? Um, so yeah, if you can find a mentor to reinforce what you're working on, and maybe to keep some eyes on them on college campus, if you're that worried about impulsivity, having that dedicated check-in once twice per week, rather than I'm going to meet with my advisor once per semester, or get a random academic coach and not have that person you're really confiding in. I think that can be really helpful, and it keeps a slice of home from whenever you go off to school. So having that relationship developed, whether it's with a coach, a therapist, or whatever, that's really comforting for our students when they go off to school.
You just mentioned something that I thought parents have been asking me recently is, what's the difference between an executive function coach and an academic coach, and do they overlay?
In a lot of ways, yes. An executive function coach is just more trained in these skills. An academic coach is someone who's going to help you maybe lay out your week, but an executive function coach is highly trained in what procrastination is, why it happens, how the neurodiverse brain works, how to help students with study strategies that work for more of the neurodivergent brain versus the typical brain. So an easy example is when you have a neurotypical brain, many of our students are motivated by rewards, consequences, and importance. When you have an ADHD brain, you're highly motivated by interest, urgency, and passion, right?
Mm.
And so just to have that simple understanding on how to structure a week. So the student with ADHD is not running with anxiety and needing a 9 out of 10 anxiety just to get started on the task. That's where an executive function coach should be highly trained, if they're a good executive function coach, and should be able to help with.
One thing advice you gave me, which I really have taken to heart and made it a forefront of our practice as we start each of our sessions, is this idea of self-regulation. And I want you to speak to that because you have a particular opinion about self-regulation. And I want you to talk about what it is, why is it important, and what do we do about it?
Self-regulation is a loaded topic. And, when you look at ADHD, like I said, it was poorly named. It's actually an executive function deficit, and depending on what researchers you believe, a self-regulation deficit. We get overstimulated, and then we can't focus, we can't sleep, we can't learn because our amygdala is just fight or flight. So we have to have really clear regulation routines. So to give you an example, we work with a lot of doctors who diagnose ADHD. Right now, where I live, these doctors can't tell if our students have ADHD or they're just sleep deprived because they're up all night on their devices, dysregulated. Sleep deprivation and ADHD present the exact same way. So one of the core strategies that we haven't talked about yet is how important it is to focus on getting some type of movement every day, 15 minutes for our students. That's actually part of the learning process. And there's been mounds of research that have come out the past few years that show that movement increases learning, attention, memory, and just overall learning, right? And so if you're not moving, you're going to struggle with your learning. Same thing with sleep. If you're not getting the right amount of sleep, you're going to struggle. So building in routines around movement and sleep are actually two of the biggest pieces of academic advice I could give anybody. And that's going to help with self-regulating as well.
I just got this deck. It's over there. I'm not going to grab it. It's called the Movement Therapy Deck. And it says 52 mindful movement exercises. I'll make sure it ends up in our summary today. But I love these cards because it's like when we think of movement, parents are probably thinking like, okay, right, you're telling me my kids have to eat well, they have to wake up by themselves, they have to make their own haircuts, and now you're telling me they have to move 15 times. They have to move for 15 minutes, and parents are like so overwhelmed with all this advice from all of us on what they should be doing, when I think it's really hard. But I think sometimes these little cards that you can have on your dining room table, and some of them, one of my favorite movements and a self-regulation activity is laughing. It's just laughing. Like laughter
Great one.
self-regulates. So it's like telling jokes is self-regulating. What are some other things that I loved? I mean, obviously the kind of yoga things, but there were lots of other things. It's like, just shaking your hands or tapping your shoulders, like little things like that can make a big difference. So movement doesn't have to be like you have to go for a 15-minute run. It can be little things that are woven in. Lately, I personally have been practicing, I run hot and intense. So I've been practicing just taking a deep breath and sighing, right? Like that counts as self-regulation and movement. And so I think if we can make those more accessible to our students, those little things that can really help too. Do you have any favorites?
Yeah,
Self-regulation?
actually, for college students, we try to have them lean into structure as much as possible. The more they have to plan and do on their own with willpower, the more they're going to struggle, right? So what is one class you can go to at the campus rec center? Or my absolute favorite is, how do we take the long way to class today? You're going to take an extra 5 minutes to get to class because you're satisfying so much stuff. You're in nature, you're getting vitamin D. And so that's kind of a requirement for most of our students, is just take the long way to class every day. It keeps you on your phone. There's a lot of regulating that goes on. And again, that's what reinforces learning.
Oh, I love that one. Okay, we have 1 minute left. What do you want to say? Pressure's
Um,
on.
good one. I think when we try to implement too much, it falls apart, right? So we threw a lot out, and there's so much out there. Finding the one and only one routine you can work on right now. We call that the lead domino. Like, what one thing can you do that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck? And so just focusing on that right now. The best one I've seen is a pre-bedtime routine, because so many of our students are struggling with sleep right now. So having a pre-bedtime routine, what does that look like for our students? That's a great one to start with.
I love that. That one helps me because I think we both are Whoop fans.
Absolutely. The biggest
Yes.
struggle with my ADHD is still my sleep. Still.
Yeah. If we can just get that like calmed heart rate going to sleep, you set yourself so much for success. And there's some ways, again, people say get a good night's sleep, but nobody tells you how do you get a good night's sleep. And what you're saying is the best advice. One thing, if you were going to do one thing today, it's like start that winding down bedtime routine. I love that. I am so happy that we got to spend time together today. And I think this conversation is, we're just going to have to keep it up.
Let's keep it going. I could talk to you forever. And thanks you so much for everyone who joined us. Yeah, I'm so grateful. And let me know if I can ever help.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Have a great day.
Have a great day, guys.
Okay, bye.